afternoon to all. It's a great pleasure to be here, sharing with you, thanks to the World Jurist Association. And I'm sorry? Now? Okay, thank you. So I was just giving thanks. So thanks again. Thanks for all of you being here. Thanks to the World Jurist Association. Today we have a conversation about autocracy, about the rights of the people, about how to make the rights of the people a reality. And we have two voices and a third that I will be helping to moderate that can bring experiences from this country, the United States, and experiences of what's happening today in the world about the rights of the people. So we have Ambassador Andy Young, who is one of the fathers of the civil rights movement. He became a voice, an activist, and then with that activism, he led the city of Atlanta to a great and profound transformation. And he was the representative of the United States here, a couple of blocks away at the United Nations at a critical time for the world. And we will be most interested in hearing his thoughts about the civil rights movement and the movement of women, of men all over the world today, fighting for the same rights that have been taken away from them in their own countries. We have Masih Alinejad. Masih Alinejad is an Iranian journalist. She has been in exile for over 10 years. She has dedicated her life to talk about the rights of the women from Iran. For many years, her voice was active, but many people told her that she was only talking about a cloth. She was the first voice that started to talk about the importance of the right of women to decide if they were going or not to wear the hijab. For years, she was talking about the choice of women that is being taken from the women from Iran, from Afghanistan, and from other countries. And 6 months ago, 8 months ago now, the Islamic Republic of Iran killed an Iranian woman, and that started a movement, a revolution for the women's right that lasted for 4 months, day after day, all over Iran. Masih was here and outside from Iran because she is a target of the Iranian regime, but she was a very active voice. She is now a US citizen, and she was the target of 2 assassination attempts in US soil. The last assassination attempt happened less than a year ago, a couple of kilometers away from here where she lived in Brooklyn. We were on a Zoom call with Gary Kasparov and myself, and a man from Azerbaijan knocked her door with an AK-47, and she didn't respond because she was in the Zoom call. These people were arrested, and now they are under trial. So she is a living case of transnational repression. And finally, my name, very briefly, is Leopoldo López. I am from Venezuela. I was mayor of Caracas for 8 years. Then I was disqualified to run for office. I started a movement for the rights of the Venezuelan people to choose for free and fair elections. And in the year 2014, after calling for protest, I was sent to prison, and I spent the next 7 years between military prison, house arrest, and the Spanish embassy. I left Venezuela at the end of 2020, and I started to meet people like Masih and others, and we decided to articulate an alliance of pro-democracy, freedom fighters of all over the world. I met Ambassador Young last year at his 90th birthday. Met his son, Bo, who is here with us as well. And I met not only a historical figure, but a great present figure. Andy Young is 91 now?
Right.
And he's a man of today. He's a man of today because he's talking about the issues that matter to us and to the young people today. So we want to have a conversation about the rights of the people, what it means to fight for the rights of the people. Mr. Andrew Young fought for the rights of the people not to be discriminated for their skin color. Masih Alinejad has given her life for the rights of women not to be discriminated and not to be not to be undermined. And I, among many others in Venezuela, have been fighting for the right of the Venezuelan people to have a free and fair election. So we have all been fighting for the rights of the people. So I'm very honored to have this conversation with Ambassador Young and with Masih Alinejad. And I would like to start asking Ambassador Young, how do you feel about the struggle for the rights of the people outside the United States in the 21st century? Do you see parallels between the struggle today and the struggle that you fought for last century?
Well, I don't want to see parallels. I want to think that the United States is different. I want to think that that the founding fathers had it right in their hearts. And even though all but one was a slave owner, they all realized that that was not a moral or survivable position. And the Constitution is written, I think, with people who were in a bad situation themselves, but who never gave up fighting to make this country as perfect as it could be. And I think that I grew up in Louisiana, in New Orleans, in a very unique position with I had an Irish grocery store on one corner, an Italian bar on another corner. The headquarters of the Nazi party was on the third corner, and I was born in 1932. So in 34, when I remember, I can remember back then my father explaining to me about this huge swastika that was 50 yards from my front door. The way he did it was take me to the movies, which was segregated, to see Jesse Owens in the 1936 Olympics. And his message was that when Jesse Owens won the 100-meter dash, Hitler was supposed to, as the head of state, present him with the medal. But he refused and instead walked out and took all of his German stormtroopers with him. And my father said, but now watch what Jesse does. And I said, he's not doing anything. He said, that's what I mean. He's not paying any attention to Adolf Hitler. He's thinking about the 3 more races that he has to run. And if he got distracted, he might not be able to win 4 races in the 36 Olympics. He did not get distracted, and he won 4 races, 4 gold medals. And his message was, don't ever get mad in a crisis like this. Don't get mad, get smart. When you get angry and frustrated, you turn off the blood to your head, and you'll do something stupid. Stay calm and let the blood continue to flow to your mind, and you'll find that you have far more power if you stop and think than if you get emotional and want to run or fight. And that's been sort of the basis of my human rights struggle. Now, it gets a little complicated as I get older and get married. Because, well, I remember I come home and I say something about one of the girls at the office said to me such and such a thing, and my daughter, who was then about 12, said, Daddy, What are you talking about? You don't have any girls at your office. You have young women at your office. And as long as you struggle to stop people from referring to you as boy, you ought to know better. And so now I got 4 children and 9 grandchildren, and it's like I got a army of freedom fighters, and most of the time they seem to be focused on me. Because I am supposedly standing for a certain concept of human rights and human dignity, and if I slip the least bit, and they can catch me not practicing it at home and with my friends, they give me hell. And I welcome that environment, because I do think that I do think that our founding fathers did not make it ironclad in the Constitution, and we left so much wiggle room, and right now everybody's wiggling. I'm talking about our Congress, our Supreme Court, and I was taken to a federal courthouse in New Orleans when I was 9 years old. And I don't know why this teacher took us to see Thurgood Marshall argue a case about the equalization of teachers' salaries. I didn't understand a word that they were saying, but I'll never forget a tall, skinny black man who would tell the judge where the cases were that he was citing. And then when the clerk brought the law books back, he'd say, "Your Honor, I think you'll find that on page 362 in the upper right-hand corner of the page." And that's all I remember, was the brilliance of his presentation. And I was given a respect for law as the liberator of a nation and of a people. And my father was a dentist, and he got very, very upset because he did not want me to be a lawyer. He thought everybody in the family ought to be dentists or doctors. I ended up neither, but I remember clearly the tensions in just growing up through well, everybody's getting liberated, and that's the way it ought to be. There are a lot of political angles to what we're doing. Let me just jump to the civil rights movement and make the point that the march from Selma to Montgomery was significant, mainly because everybody showed up. Rabbi Heschel was in the march. Walter Reuther was in the march. There were men, women, all races. The head of the Archdiocese of Greek Orthodox churches was in the march. And everybody says this is a wonderful march. The reason for the march, though, was that the judge in Selma, who happened to have been appointed by John Kennedy, located in Mobile, but he would not hear our cases. When we'd file cases in his courtroom, he just let them stack up, and we were getting no response. And Dr. King said, well, maybe if we march to Montgomery, that would put us in Judge Frank Johnson's jurisdiction, and he would, I think, at least give us a fair hearing. He not only gave us a fair hearing, but he gave us the results that we needed and wanted. Putting this in the context of our present confusion, every judge that made a significant decision in the civil rights movement in the 60s was a Republican appointee. Every judge, in every case. That hasn't been focused on by today's Republican Party. Why did that happen that way? We were voting for Democrats for president and national office because they seem to be more responsive, or the politics of the United States seem to be more responsive nationally to human rights and race relations. But the other issues that are equally as controversial and complicated are causing shifts in our society that I am trying to understand and don't. But I find myself very much attracted, since I had 3 daughters and only 1 son, and my oldest daughter now is the head of the ACLU in Georgia. And so I've caught more hell from the women in my life, my family. My wife also was a very independent woman who didn't give me the time of day unless she thought that I was deserving at that time. But we were happily married for 40 years before she passed on. And so the world's in a complicated place right now. And so institutions like this are called on to be as rational and level as we can be, but also not just to have good opinions, but to find ways to put those opinions into action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. So, Masih, what has been your experience in struggling for the rights of women?
It's difficult talking after you. Honestly, it's a pleasure being with you, sitting alongside you, and I try to learn. But to be honest, when you say that fighting for rights, you said that not to get emotional, not to get mad. I said, oh my God, I have to leave this room. Because I get emotional, I get mad, I get really angry.
Don't get mad, get smart. And you are smart.
Thank you, I appreciate that. No, I was just, trying to be honest and admit that if something that I can learn from you, maybe it's that. Because, yes, I'm coming from a country where from the age of 7, we are told that you're second-class citizen. From the age of 7, that if we don't cover our hair, then we're like master criminals in the eyes of government. I'm coming from a country where I've been told that if you sing, you're a criminal. If you enter a stadium, you're a criminal. If you dance, you're a criminal. So if you want to travel abroad, you have to get permission from your husband, from your father. If you want to get a passport, you have to get permission from your father, from your husband. Don't get me wrong, I love all men around me, but I don't need any permission from them. I'm smart enough, I'm educated enough, I'm brave enough, powerful enough, and I can control my own body, control my own thoughts, my movement, and my voice. And I don't need any permission from men. So fighting against this barbaric laws and discriminatory laws in Iran it's not easy because you're being educated in that way that if you have a loud voice, then you are a corrupted woman. If you actually get mad with all those oppressors telling you, shh, cover yourself. Otherwise, you're gonna, I mean, can you believe that in 21st century, right now, we're all sitting here mixed together, but this is a crime. If we have this crowd all together like this in Iran, in my beautiful homeland. Why? Because men, in the eyes of clerical regime, are very weak, and you cannot control yourself if you see men unveiled. Women unveiled. I wish it was men. So for that, we have to actually choose from early age whether to be a victim or to be a warrior. And I was actually making a joke saying that I get mad, but my frustration, my pain, my struggle, my anger helped me actually to put it in a way to take action. But let's be very honest, it's not easy because being unveiled take you to prison. Singing land you to jail. Like dancing, going to stadium, all these activities that men take it for granted, can cause a huge price for you. You can get lashes, you can get executed in Iran. So what I did, I started to make men around me like allies for myself. I started from my little brother from early age. He was scared of the darkness. I grew up in a very, very tiny village. We didn't have running water, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have an inside bathroom. We had outhouse in the backyard garden. And I remember that I was really scared of the darkness. And my mother used to tell me that the darkness is like a monster. If you're scared of the darkness can swallow you all, can devour you. But instead of being scared of the darkness, just open your eyes as wide as you can, stare into the darkness. This is how the darkness will disappear. So as a kid, I thought this is a fact, and I used to open my eyes as wide as I could. And it worked. So my brother was scared of the darkness during the night. So I told him that I can take you to the bathroom every night, but you have to take me to the river to show me how to swim, which women are not allowed. You have to teach me how to ride a bicycle, which women are not allowed. You have to take me to a stadium, which girls were not allowed. So teach me how to sing, how to dance, how to go to the street. I don't want to stay all my time behind the curtain. That's how I used my power, because I knew how to defeat the darkness. I was scared of the darkness. I learned how to do my own job, but I used my power to make my brother as an ally. And this is now you see in Iran. Women are actually in the streets removing their hijab, but all men are alongside them. So we are powerful enough to fight back, but we're trying to tell the regime that men, our brothers, our husbands, our fathers, they don't own our bodies. They are like us, and together we can fight back all the discriminatory laws. I mean, it's still men in Iran recently, right after the brutal death of Masih, 22-year-old girl, she got killed in the hand of morality police just because a little bit of her hair was visible. Right after that, I was like, it's gonna be just women removing their hijab? No, it was men alongside them. And for that, not only Iranian women got killed, men were sentenced to execution, and 7 men got executed for supporting their sisters. But now, after, the anniversary of Mahsa Amini is coming, 600 people got killed, 20,000 people got arrested, 40 people are in the death row, but believe me, now this is the regime is scared of women. And for that, they brought the morality police back into the street to prevent the uprising, which is, they are sure that these women are gonna take back to the street. So we're not gonna give up. We're gonna fight back the darkness, and we will win this battle alongside men.
Thank you. listening to Masih, who's become a good friend, I think for many of you, you might think that this is something far away from the US, far away from Europe, far away from our day-to-day. But we need to realize that the majority of the people in the world are living under some sort of discrimination, are living under autocratic regimes. 70% of the world's population is living today under autocratic regimes, according to VDEM, an organization that follows this. There are more countries shifting to autocracies than countries transitioning to democracy in the 21st century. So the reality is that the large part of the world's population is undergoing some sort of discrimination. I myself, I was not discriminated for my skin color or for my gender, but for my political views. And alongside with many other Venezuelans, we were persecuted, many of us were imprisoned, thousands were sent to exile, and we don't have a voice. And that level of discrimination is happening all over the world. So that is why we decided to bring together these different movements, activists, realities that might seem that are very different, but in the core, we're fighting for the same thing. We're fighting for the right of the people to be equal. We're fighting for the right of the people to have respect. We're fighting for the right of the people to have dignity. And that can only happen under a democratic system. That can only happen under the rule of law. That can only happen if the people choose who they are governed by. And we believe that these are universal values. And that is what motivates us to bring together people, movements, activists from Africa, Asia, Middle East, Eastern Europe, Latin America, together under one voice. Because the world is becoming more and more autocratic. Even democracies are threatened today by autocratic tendencies. So democracy is under siege. And we need to bring the best of the struggle for democracy in order to make democracy appealing, in order to make democracy sexy, in order to make democracy something that is worth fighting for, in order to make freedom something worth fighting for, something worth struggling and motivating. Today, we see that there is a large movement to defend the environment, and that is important, and I believe that that is very important. But the reality is that the core problem of many of the issues that we are facing, the environment, corruption, human rights, the core problem is autocratic regimes that don't respect the rights of the people, that don't adhere to the rule of law, and that don't allow the people to express themselves freely. So I want to thank Ambassador Young, Masih, and open for questions, if there are some questions from the floor today. Yes.
I don't have a question, but more of a comment. My name is Christy Jones. I'm the executive director of the International Association of Women Judges. But I'm also a peace and conflict scholar with George Mason University. And I think one of the things that I have certainly studied from Ambassador Young and from Dr. King Jr. is that part of the conversation also has to be the type of peace we're talking about. Because for this conference, the title is Peace Through Law, and the focus is very much on law. But we also have to talk about the peace part, and that peace can't simply be the absence of violence, as Dr. King once said. It has to be the presence of human rights, and peace cannot simply be stability or security. It has to be the lack of discrimination, access of all people, the ability, as you said, Mr. Lopez, the ability of all people to participate in a vibrant democracy. And I think as we're talking about the law portion, we also have to keep in mind that peace portion and making peace of that kind sexy, making peace of that kind our primary focus. Because you can certainly have the rule of law and have stability, but still have violence, whether it's cultural violence, structural violence, economic violence, gender violence, and that is not peace. That's security, sure, that's stability, sure, but that's not the peace that we're looking for. So I hope that we're also very focused on that portion as well. Thank you.
I personally greatly appreciate that comment, because we are usually faced with the argument that stability is more important than justice, and that stability, thinking that stability is going to bring peace because of the lack of violence, is the place where we would like to go. And I believe that this is a challenge that free countries are always facing, because in our countries, many times the transition to democracy has to go through a period of instability. And because many countries don't want stability, they rather not support a transition to democracy. So we're many times faced with that issue that you're dealing with. Masih?
I totally agree. No, I don't have anything to add. It was a great point, and thank you for actually addressing that.
Can I?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
No, but please go ahead.
Well, I think this is a different world now than the world I grew up in the 30s or the 60s. And there was a stability, there was a national order. We had Cronkite and Dan Rather, and we knew who was on the news, and we knew which one we liked. I found a scandal going in my hometown, and I didn't know anything about it, but it was all coming to my younger friends through social media. And there are all kinds of manipulations of our society right now that, in terms of elections, people who can't get votes can get money for opinions that I don't think are very democratic or even Republican. And that was the other thing. When I went to Congress in 1972, I agreed with almost all of the Republicans. And one other thing while I got it, and then I'll shut up. I went to, President Carter asked me to talk to South African leaders back in the 70s. And when I went there, the State Department, the ambassador said, well, we don't really relate to them very much. I said, well, that's who's calling the shots here in South Africa. I'd like to talk to him. And so they got me an appointment with P.W. Botha. I use his name because I'm sure he's gone on to glory and faced the judgment of the Lord by now. But he asked me some interesting questions. He didn't even say hello. He said, why did white people vote for you? And he had seen about my election, and I said, I don't know, but I said I grew up with black and white people, and it's a white majority district, but we had a lot of problems with strikes and this, that, the other, and I had been involved with the trade union movement, and I ended up helping to settle the strikes. And he said, how much intermarriage you have in Atlanta? And I said, probably very little compared to what you're thinking. And he grunted again. But then he said, how long do you think we have before the bloodbath? And I said, what bloodbath? And he said, surely these black people are going to rise up one day and kill us all. And I said, I don't think so. And I said, Jimmy Carter comes from a neighborhood, a state, a county that's 80% black. I said, he's lived almost all of his life in the same situation you're in South Africa, and he sent me to offer to consult with you if you're interested in moving toward a multiracial democracy. And that kind of direct confrontation, I think, led to a series of meetings between our governments, involvement with the African frontline states, and there was a process that was moving very well in terms of democratizing Africa. Then all of a sudden we changed parties and it went away for a while. And now the last I've seen is, the Wagner Group raping Africa of its minerals, and particularly the lithium and cobalt and things that we will desperately need for a high-tech society. And I mean, all of these things contribute to a kind of global insecurity that that I don't have the answers to, but that I've been accustomed to struggling with those questions, and I think it would be helpful for us not to have, textbook answers, maybe not even legal answers, but enter into a period of trial and put our values and our institutions in a position to question them and say, how are we doing now, and how are we going to cope this next hurdle? For one thing we're aware of, the Earth is moving probably faster than we've ever thought. And we're more desperately affected by, well, climate change. And if nothing else, we know that this year like we've never known it before. And so the minds and the laws and the customs that you have been trained to defend are in play. But that's not something for us to run from. That's something for us to run toward before it gets out of hand.
Thank you.
My name is Leopoldo López. I'm from Venezuela. I'm very happy and very proud and honored to be here to share a reflection with personalities like Masih, like yourself, John, and Paul. I was ambassador of the interim government in Canada for 2 years. I was honored by this situation, the struggle for freedom and democracy, and that position for me created a huge concern because it's an immense contradiction between the concept of
Sovereignty.
the concept of human rights, and rule. You see how many treaties, how many conventions, how many chapters talk about human rights, talk about freedom, talk about democracy, and you see that human rights in the life superior of sovereignty. It's a huge contradiction when you try to just to apply the principle of responsibility to protect, and at the end that not happen. Not happen because in the Venezuelan case, Ambassador, we have more people dying, more children dying, more people escape from Venezuela, not in the last 23 years, in the last 3 years, than what happened in the 7 years just for free. Not just for freedom, just for fight for freedom and struggle for freedom, Leopoldo López. How we can do in order to move forward in the rule of law and the real protection of human rights to vindicate countries like Venezuela, which many countries in the country have, but the same kind of regime in America and the rest of the planet, how we can move forward in the rule of law to avoid finally this kind of threat and vindicate human rights against the terrible concept of sovereignty that this kind of regime always appeals to defense the independence of them and independence of the state. One more thing. I understand. I wonder every day in my experience as ambassador. United Nations, we recognize states. We don't recognize government. So do you recognize a legitimate government? Do you recognize a legitimate government which violates human rights? And one more thing. Just yesterday, a little girl, 14 years old, tried to cross the border in the forest of the area between Panama and Colombia. She has been raped 67 times. And his mother and his father died. And that is the situation of many people in Venezuela crossing the border to live with freedom. 7.5 million of people displaced.
This is how cause is important, you know, because a lot of people are losing their homes because we're not getting anywhere.
I'm not looking for an answer for you, Mr. Young, because I know that you don't have the answer. But you have others. I'm sure your reflection. Thank you.
Thank
The
you.
answer is with us, with people in Venezuela, with people in Iran, with people in Syria, in Iraq, and everywhere. Because, look, I believe that we have to fight harder to convince the rest of the world that you all got united to support people of Ukraine rightfully. And the war is being imposed on women of Iran by the Islamic Republic, as you said, on people of Venezuela, like a girl just having normal life. They deserve it. So this is, in my opinion, we have faced the war in many autocracy, many dictatorship, but the problem is that in America, in European countries, I'm being very honest, the democratic leaders are lost, because they believe that they can easily negotiate with the killers, with dictators, with people like Putin, Maduro, with Khamenei, with all these people who kill their own people, but they don't want to negotiate with the opposition, with people who say no to the dictatorship. They don't want to legitimize the civil disobedience in Iran. Let me be very, very clear. Leopoldo actually mentioned about that. For years and years, I myself have been fighting against compulsory hijab, compulsory veiling. A lot of Democrats, congresswomen, a lot of female politicians from Europe, they were saying that we don't want to interfere. My women in Iran, they risk going to jail, but female politicians from Europe, they were obeying hijab in front of the leaders of the Islamic Republic and bowing to them and saying that, you know, we don't want to interfere internal matter. And I was like, wow, by not saying anything, by keeping silent, when women are getting raped, when girls are getting raped, you're interfering. Because you're empowering the killers. You're empowering the dictators. So for years and years, my friend Gary Kasparov was warning the rest of the world about the danger of Putin. And he was labeled, the people were calling him warmonger. People are calling you a terrorist. People calling me a betrayer of your own country. So they try to mislead the rest of the world by labeling us. But guess what? Now the war is in the middle of Europe, in the heart of Europe. Now Putin is targeting Europeans. So for that, I believe that if we, from Venezuela to Russia to Zimbabwe, Nicaragua, everywhere, if we don't get united, really help, if we don't help each other, then convince the democratic countries as well, the Europeans, the Americans, to be united. If we don't do that, we're going to lose the narrative, we're going to lose the battle, we're going to lose the war. So this is our option, to keep silent, because, you know, as you said that, every day people are losing hope. That in 3 days, 1,500 people got killed. So people say that, what can we do? We have to not put just pressure on Maduro, Putin, Khamenei. We have to put pressure on the Europeans and Americans.
Thank you, Masih.
I want to add, Orlando, thank you, Orlando, for remembering us the situation. Because, you know, like, we talk all these events like law and institution, and we make a good diagnosis. But I want to remember you in this audience, political prisoners. I remember always when Leopoldo was in jail, a phrase, you treat your prisoners the same way you treat your country. And right now, we have more than 1 million political prisoners in the world. Leopoldo was in prison 7 years. But right now, in this moment, we have in Bolivia, Luis Fernando Camacho, in a situation, in a very bad situation, horrible situation, in the jail of Chochocoto. So what we can do? So we can fight. We can fight with our voice. We are here together, all together in the World Jurist Association, thinking about how we can be stronger, like we are doing right now with the alliance that we have around the world. So how is Luis Fernando Camacho? How is Ronald Reagan in Venezuela? How is many political prisoners right now in Cuba, in Iran, in Ukraine, in Russia? So there are many political prisoners asking for help, having hope that to release, to have freedom, thinking about that people that right now is in a small cell with torture, cruel treatment, torture. We need to talk about that in this institution. We need to ask for respect. That is human rights. Political prisoners and freedom for them. And if you don't know how is that, or you don't feel like near, because I have like, thanks God, my own experience with my husband that was in jail 7 years. Yesterday when I flew from Madrid to New York, I see in the airplane a movie, Modelo 77. Search and see. It's a jail in Spain when Franco died, in Barcelona. It's impressed how they treat the prisoners. It's the same, like similar than in the name of the Father movie as well. You can write it and you can see it. But right now, that's happening in the world. Right now, in this moment, with Fernando Camacho of Bolivia.
Thank you. So we'd like to ask for 2 minutes of your time just to show you what we have been doing that Masih mentioned. So last year we gathered knowing that we needed to spread this struggle globally, because this is our biggest challenge is not to keep the struggle in one single country. We created this alliance, and the alliance is called the World Liberty Congress, but I'll just let you see for yourself what we have been working on. I hope it works.
All over the world, there has been struggles for freedom, massive protests, tens of thousands of people. Today, we want that fight to be the fight of all.
Freedom fighters from every quarter of the world are now gathering in the capital of the city.
The World Liberty Congress is about bringing together like-minded people that are very different, but we have the heart and our commitment in one word: freedom.
Tyrants are afraid of us. That's why they put us in prison or put us in exile. And we know for certain that together we are stronger.
It's very important to understand that violation of human rights anywhere is violation of human rights everywhere.
We are very happy to be here today to say never give up.
Let's fight for the people and especially the women in our region.
We have to destroy this friendship between dictatorship.
And that's why we are here. This is your conference, and this is your Congress. The World Liberty Congress is all about you.
All these things will be useful in the years to come as we fight really what's a common enemy, which is the autocracies who've learned to work together, who share tools, who share information, who share tactics, and now we need to share things to fight back against them.
And now, having here activists from more than 40 countries, we are sending our message loud and clear to every dictator on the planet. Our time has come.
Unity will become a very important factor that will make us win.
We, the freedom fighters, are more united than dictators.
We need to have the attitude of those who have the eye of the tiger for freedom.
Dictators are fighting for power, but we are fighting for freedom, dignity, and democracy.
We are
Fighters
For freedom.
freedom. Freedom.
Freedom.
freedom.
Freedom.
Freedom.
You just want to share with you that we are fighting for freedom, as we said. But we are recognizing that together we are stronger, that there is a reality that autocrats are working together, and that we need to work together as well. And we have realized that together we can bring more awareness, because at the end it's the same issue that we are struggling against. It's about discrimination.
You know, Martin Luther King used to have a quote that he would say in private. I don't know whether he ever said it much. He said, "Evil cannot permanently organize. It has within its being the seeds of its own destruction."
It's
Thank
beautiful.
you.
But unfortunately now evils in the world are more united than, freedom fighters. And
democracy.
it breaks my heart when I see that United Nations became a place to unite the dictators. Just a couple of months ago, Putin had a seat to monitor human rights globally. The Islamic Republic had a seat to monitor women's rights globally. A country that killed women for just showing their hair, they were like having top seat for monitoring women's rights globally. So for that, I strongly believe, me, Gary Kasparov, Leopoldo, and many other dissidents from autocracy, we believe that the time has come that we, the dissidents, must have our own General Assembly. And actually, my dream is to get Republican and Democrats united when it comes to be tough on terror. Because believe me, if the dictators want to, like Islamic Republic, want to assassinate or kill or take hostages like American citizens, they never ask you that whether you're Republican or Democrat, whether you're left or right, you're black or white. No. They never said, oh, you support Trump or you support Biden. They hate America. They hate democracy. So they kill all Americans. Right now that I'm talking to you, American citizen in prison in Iran, British citizen, German citizen, Swedish citizen, they're all being used like bargaining chip to get nuclear deal. So you see, imagine a day that Europeans, Americans get united and ask the Islamic Republic to respect human rights.
Thank you. So, yes, a question in the back.
must allow cultural norms to go away. We must allow things that have been practiced centuries before to be gone. Would you be itself saying that you can't practice your old culture, you have to practice this new way of seeing because it's the new way of doing it? Is introducing democracy kind of getting rid of centuries of culture that has already been there? And while it needs to go away, while we need to prevent people from suffering under it, are we becoming the people who are pretty much telling people what they should be doing?
I didn't really get it. If you mean that how we actually present our fight and how we protect democracy, I have to say that for years and years, we have been told this, like talking about compulsory job as we now seeing that the Iranian women are resisting. Many people in the West were saying the same. This is part of your culture. This is part of the culture of the people in Iran. So that's why the West must respect this. And many Western politicians were saying that because of white savior complex or this kind of argument, we don't want to even touch the issue. But let's be very clear. Forcing, like, how old are you? 18 years old. Forcing like teenagers to cover themselves, forcing 9-year-old or 7-year-old girl to cover herself to get an education, it's not part of our culture. It's the culture of ISIS. It's the culture of Taliban. It's the culture of the Islamic Republic. And I always say that. Imagine a day that not just people in Afghanistan now, they're being kicked out from a school. Imagine it's not women of Afghanistan. Imagine if it's you being kicked out from a school. Imagine if it's you being kicked out from a stadium just because of your skin color or your being a woman. Imagine it's you being kicked out from like your job just because of your skin color or your belief or your opinion. What would you do? Well, honestly, if it's not women of Iran, Afghanistan, people of Venezuela, like you're being kicked out for running the office because of your opinion. Imagine if it was women of the Western countries being killed for showing their hair, girls of America being kicked out from a school. What would have been the reaction of the rest of the world? Crazy, outrage, no? So that's all we need. That culture, if you believe that this is the culture of people of Afghanistan and Iran, or culture is flexible. A lot of people sacrifice their life. And I want to actually end this and not talk about Iran anymore because my focus is not about women of Iran, but we have to talk about women in Iran when they're being told that cover yourself right now. Then the women said that we're not going to do that. The morality police telling them that you have to respect the law. This is the law of the land. And women say that slavery used to be legal. So you see, they learned from America. They want to actually refer to America. So this is our culture. Dignity, democracy, freedom, this is our culture, and we have to get united. Isolate the Islamic Republic. We want to get rid of dictators. I mean, now Venezuela have election, and I always say that, we want Maduro to be out. We want Islamic Republic to be out. We deserve to have secular democracy right here that you have. And for that, I think we, the people of all these autocracies, are better allies than our killers and our dictators for Americans and Europeans.
Thank you, Masih. Yes, sir.
Michael, I'm the Executive Director of ACE, the American Society of International Law. You mentioned the word isolate. I was actually thinking about this, and I suppose it's a question for you, Ambassador Young, or anyone else that wants to take the question. That, in the old days, one of the best tricks we had up our sleeve for dealing with bad actors was to isolate them. But our moderators told us now that 70-some% of the world live under an autocratic regime. So I wonder who's being isolated now. Do we still have that power of isolation? I know that at the UN, 143 nations voted to condemn Putin and the Russian Federation for their invasion of Ukraine. Now we'd like to hold them accountable to create a tribunal on aggression, but we find maybe we don't have the votes for that, right? So I'm just wondering about the dynamics of isolation. Are we on the other side of isolation now? Is it democracies that are being isolated rather
No, I think that's a great point, and I'll be just very brief on this. There is, in the case of Venezuela, and I think it's, I've heard it from other cases, when there are sanctions imposed, or when there is a position by the United States or by Europe or by a democratic country, we heard many, many times the phrase, well, now the regime is isolated. In reality, isolated from whom? And relative to what? If we think about it, one of the reasons why Maduro and many other dictators are still in power is because of the type of international support that they get. And yes, we did get in our struggle for democracy support by the United States, by the democracies in Latin America, by European countries. But what type of support we were getting? We were getting diplomatic support. We were getting political support. But on the other hand, the type of support that these regimes are getting is military, it's financial, it's kleptocratic, is to use their social media and communications.
Yeah.
So who's isolated from whom? The reality is that Maduro was not isolated. Is that Venezuela shifted from being part of the free world, the ecosystem of the free world, to be part of the ecosystem of the autocratic world. And in that world, he gets, and the dictatorship gets, more support, tactical, strategic, real support, than the type of support that we get from the free world. And that's a reality not only in Venezuela, but elsewhere. So sometimes we try to see the lens of the world through the lens of the free world. And that's a mirage, because the world, the autocratic world, is larger than the free world.
True, I just want to add something. I mean, when Masih, 20-year-old girl, got killed in Iran, the level of the support that we've been witnessing globally was phenomenal. But right after, when I saw that, like, you know, actress, well-known athletes, ordinary women across the globe were cutting their hair to show their solidarity with women of Iran who were cutting their hair, sign of act of protest and mourning. And I was really happy. But as soon as when the politicians, the female politicians in the West started to cut their hair, I was like, this is it. Because they're going to use this and saying that, okay, we did our part. We cut our hair to show our support to the women of Iran. I said, no, we don't want you to cut your hair. We want you to cut your ties with the killers. And people were like, no, you know, Masih, you're too radical. You're exaggerating. This is a beautiful way of showing solidarity. Guess what happened? The foreign minister of Belgium, who actually cut her hair to show that solidarity to Iranian women, now she invited one of the killers in her own country. She was actually the one being criticized by a lot of politicians from her own country to resign, and saying that, but why did you invite the killer? And she said, we have to still negotiate with them. And my friend Leopoldo is right. They are not being isolated. A lot of time we see that, you know, by sanctioning or cutting their hair, or in theory saying that we're supporting the freedom fighters in Venezuela, Russia, Iran, but in practice, they still keep the ties with the killers, and that's the problem.
Thank you. Yes, in the back.
My name is José Ramón López. I'm a member of the European Parliament. I just wanted to fully agree with what Leopoldo has said, and just some regard to what he can say. We know quite well what is happening in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, in Cuba, as well in Iran. Just last week, we made a resolution of the European Parliament in Chicago about Cuba, about Venezuela, about the situation of the rehabilitation of she's the first, because she's leader in the opposition, but it is the same for the rest of the 13 countries trying to run for the open elections. Why do I say that? Because really, 2 days ago, there was the EU summit in Brussels. And it was a shame. It was a shame. I want to make it different, because some people that they realize that after the European
Yeah.
Why Delcy Rodriguez has been kissed by my president, Pedro Sanchez? This is not a decision of the European Parliament. Not at all. Whereas the European Parliament, we know quite well this is the difference.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. You?
I'm Janet Rubel, and I'm here representing the Global Citizens Circle, and Ambassador Young is the chair of the Global Citizens Circle. The question I have is for Ambassador Young.
Can you speak louder, please?
Can I speak louder?
Yep.
Oh, sure.
Wow,
There you go.
you have a loud voice.
Yeah.
I can speak very loud.
There we go. We want to hear you.
Loud question that I have for Ambassador Young is this, because you, sir, have been on the front lines in the fight for freedom in this country and around the world. What are the three biggest lessons that you have learned over those many years of leadership and struggle, and how would you equate this with the rule of law?
I don't know whether I can think of three lessons, but I mean, looking back now on the last 60 years, well, your husband was one of my lawyers 55 years ago. And we would say freedom is a constant struggle, and that I don't know that you ever win, that as soon as you get through one round, another one comes up. And that it's being willing. I mean, I can't march anymore. My knees gave out. But it doesn't mean that I can't come to a gathering like this. And I still have a feeling, though, that, well, part of my job with the civil rights movement was to go in before a demonstration. We tried not to have demonstrations without going to the person we're demonstrating against. I don't know that you can do that in Iran, but you can do that in Birmingham. We could do that in Birmingham in '63. And so before Martin Luther King started in March, he told me in December, you got a couple of months, and you have to find a way to meet people of goodwill, people who will talk to you, and see if you can get them to talk to me and us. And there had to be well, we were able to have a debate. A discussion. And it was not threatening. It was that we are tired and we can't live as second-class citizens anymore. And we've decided that as of March the 1st, we're probably going to start, well, we're going to stop buying things. And we still found that the economic withdrawal and boycotts of consumer goods, of everything except food and medicine. If a group of people stops buying everything except food or medicine, you win over the economic class, and you put them on your side. And looking back on it, we tried to find a way to isolate the fascists without calling them that. But to work against people who just went along but didn't really believe. And I mean, we almost had to believe that the majority of the people in a situation, and I am very sorry that President Carter didn't have another term. Because I think that he wanted to try to use that as a moment to resolve some of the difficulties in places like Iran. And Iran is something that I think he helped to create, not knowingly. But when I first joined the government, the U.S. government, a friend of mine had been in, when I went to South in 1954, he went to the Middle East. And he did a 300-page memo and sent it to me, and it was mostly about Iran. And it was saying that the Shah was not he did not have enough control, that there was something bubbling in the mosques, and that we should look at, the U.S. should look at working with Iran for developing a parliament under the Constitution and have some kind of parliamentary, constitutional monarchy. You honor whoever's in charge, but you empower the middle class with a parliament. And there were a number of ideas floating that could have prevented this. And what's on now? There are also a number, I also believe that in the 50s and 60s, we probably had more Iranians studying in the United States than any other nationality.
Now we have a lot of Iranian officials' relatives studying here. All the mullahs were saying death to America, they're sending their relatives here in America to study.
Well, that's maybe, I don't know what the answer is, but I'm saying that you try. And anything that can awaken a people is worth a try. And I don't know that it has to be always confrontation. That there has to be a constant dialogue with a few people who think of nothing else but how to make this group of people more democratic. Now, frankly, what I was thinking of in Atlanta, I said that regardless of the politics, global warming, food in Iran is a problem. And that some of the things that we're doing with our foundation are trying to grow food in hot temperatures. And that food is very political, and yet it's not political. And if we were developing an agricultural base in Iran as another food provider, aquaponically, for instance, just to give people more to eat. I mean, democracy isn't all about law, and it's about the quality of life of citizens. And anytime you can improve that or say that you are building a society with more opportunity for more people, that eventually leads to something like democracy. I don't know how, but it's the problems. I don't know that China's, say China's the biggest autocrat state, but I was told that there are 142 national cultural identities, cultural nationalities that don't want to be part of the Communist Party, that like oh, I can't think of his name, the Dalai Lama, that his whole country it does not want to be a part of China. And China hadn't had a war since 1979, but they spend more on military than we do. And yet all of their military is used against their people, or people within their the geography that they want to call communist and that we tend to call communist. The Minister of Cultural Nationalities said, he said, the U.S. seems to have a clue as to how to integrate people and involve people and help people to grow into one country. He said, we don't have a clue. We want them to go into one way and one way only, and if they don't, we go to war against them. And that is not a way for a state to survive. And so looking at a society from the perspective of human rights and poverty, agriculture, anything, you know, water availability. There's some things that we have to find a way to do that will help us to get more people free and independent.
Thank you.
And I don't know that even in this country, elections are really under tremendous fire. I mean, we were doing pretty good on national elections, but now things have gone to the state level. We're not prepared, or at least my kind of people are not as prepared at the state level as they were at the national level. Now, can we get prepared in 2 years or a year and a half? I don't know. I hope so. But we're going to have state, local, and federal rule of law. And that's not easy.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Young. Thank you, Masih. Just a brief comment on your last statement. I think everybody that believes in democracy, in human rights, in freedom, they also believe in dialogue. They also believe in understanding somebody else's point of view.
Yeah.
However, we have seen in many of our countries the way in which dialogue, negotiations are manipulated to gain time and to create a sense of two parts as being equally responsible for the problem that the country faces. And I believe that there is no moral equivalence between the oppressor and the oppressed. There's no moral equivalent between the women of Iran and the Islamic Republic of Iran. There's no moral equivalent between the large majority of the Venezuelan people and Maduro's regime, who is torturing. But many times, we are forced, or we are taken into positions of dialogue. We have been in a process in Venezuela of negotiation for 22 years. We've had the mediation of the OAS. More than 7 presidents have tried to mediate. The Pope tried to mediate. The Norwegians tried to mediate. And the result has always been the same.
Yeah. I mean, not to say this is not necessary and right, but I want to talk to Chevron. See, I want to talk to Chevron because right next door to Chevron, right next door to Venezuela, is
Guyana.
Guyana.
Brazil.
Guyana. The same oil that's flowing under Venezuela is flowing under Guyana. And there's no reason why Chevron, who is the major driller in Venezuela,
That's something.
isn't drilling in Guyana. And I'm saying that we found that to change a government, you have to have at least 51% public opinion. To work through a business, you have to get the shareholders. And you can find more enlightenment in the shareholders when their money's at stake than you can in the politicians. And so well, I don't know.
I want to add something. You actually mentioned that, so you were so close to Martin Luther King before having any march that, like having negotiation is better. But I have to say that. I mean, otherwise, it just kills me. The Islamic Republic doesn't understand any language, just language of killings, torturing, assassinating, raping. So for that, women's march in Iran is bloody. Like teenagers are getting killed. So the US government has spent 2 decades, the resources of its own people, to negotiate with the Islamic Republic. What they have achieved? Nothing. Nothing. The Islamic Republic still take hostages.
But the United States, let's face it, the United States drove Mossadegh out. And the United States the problems in Iran go back to the 50s, and we were on the wrong side of history.
America is on the wrong side of the history now.
Yeah, but we've been on the wrong side of history all along.
So
now that's not necessary. See, there have been times, or there are times, when, for a variety of reasons, which may or may not seem relevant to us now, we can find somebody in some U.S. government agency or in some business that has an interest, and that somehow, I mean, you're not just talking to your enemies, you're trying to find a few friends.
I strongly believe that time for negotiating to dictators is over. I myself was part of the reformist group in Iran, reformist journalists. I voted for this government for years and years, and I had hoped that negotiating with this government, choosing between bad and worse, became choose between worse and disaster. And now we have only one option. The people of Iran are better allies for Americans rather than these killers, and I think American government must negotiate and talk with civil society, with people of Iran, not with these killers, because they use that. They use that a lot to actually downplay us, saying that, look, we negotiate with the most powerful country, America. Who are you, the people, challenging the laws or challenging us? So that's why I believe that talking to dictators, it's just empowering them to kill more people.
I don't want to. I mean, I don't want you to give up on talking to people. Somebody in the United States ought to be talking to somebody in Iran about nuclear weapons. Leave human rights to somebody else. See? But there are enough issues in Iran where Iran is vulnerable and we are vulnerable that we need to get those resolved. Agriculture is usually neutral, see? And if some big food producer wants to start developing Iranian agriculture, help them, see? Because that's feeding. You've got to care for the people while you fight for them. And you have to show that you can serve them better than the authorities.
I think you have to invite me to Atlanta. This is a very serious topic, and I would love to talk about this more because we want you to be on our side and tell the government of Iran, stop negotiating with the killers. I love you so much.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. Thanks for the panel.
society.
Thank you, Ambassador Young. Thank you, Masih. And thanks to all of you. Thank you.